I still love that music. I love that music every time we do these shows. I just dance along to it. It's early morning for me, but I still dance along to it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good everything, everyone. My name is Joe Lurie. I am on what we call the Intune CAT team, the Customer Acceleration team. Today, it's important to note that that's unimportant. I'm just here to host my friends Juanita, Deepika, and Jason, and on all things Windows and Intune, answering your questions live here. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves the way I see them and my people pane. I see Deepika, and then I see Jason, and then Juanita. So why don't you introduce yourselves in that order?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining. Myself, Deepika Vadva. I'm a group engineering manager here in Intune and happy to be talking to all of you.
Yeah, good morning. Same with what Deepika said there. We got people from all over the world, so welcome in. My name is Jason Sandys. I'm also on the CAT team along with Joe Lurie, and I'm a product manager that specializes in most things Windows.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Juanita Baptiste. I am a product manager in Intune, and my focus area is Windows Autopilot.
Yeah, Juanita and Jason are really your friends here today because I know some of the questions that have already been asked. I see Configuration Manager, I see Entra ID questions, I see Windows, I see Autopilot questions. So keep those questions coming. Before we start really talking about questions that have been asked yet, I want to first find out, Juanita, I hear a lot of people, my customers especially, talking to me about Autopilot. They're all trying to do Autopilot. So I'm going to start with you and then go over to Jason. What are some of the comments that you hear from your customers, or some of the recommendations that you give to your customers when we talk about Autopilot?
Sure. When we talk about Autopilot, especially for customers that are like starting out, they're coming over from the config manager world and DT world, there's kind of a lot of misconceptions about Autopilot, what it is, especially starting out. So some of our recommendations on how to deploy Autopilot is to not bring over your same config manager baggage. You have to think of Autopilot differently. It's not config manager in the cloud. It's designed to get like the best configuration, the best deployment, just using pure Entra ID Join devices. And we ask people to reevaluate their policies when they bring it over. Don't try to bring every single policy over from SCCM over to Intune. And usually when people do that, the reason is like, oh, this policy has always been there. I don't know what it does or what it doesn't do, but I'm too afraid to lose it. So we ask the people, my key recommendation is to keep an open mind when you're transferring from SCCM to Autopilot to Intune, and kind of just think of it differently. If you think of it as an SCCM construct, you're gonna struggle. You're gonna struggle. And we also highly recommend that you do the full Entra ID join, not the hybrid join as well.
Yeah, I expected Jason to jump up with that one. And before Jason, before you speak, I didn't mean to say that Deepika is not your friend. Deepika is our friend as well. I was saying here because
Absolutely.
I see Windows, I see Entra, I see Autopilot questions already being asked. Jason, can you want to expand on we hope that you will do Entra Join instead of hybrid?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a slight tangent there, but clearly that's our direction. The best way to say this, most people shouldn't be surprised by the fact that Microsoft is about providing cloud value, about providing cloud-centric, cloud-based services and products. That's what we've been as a company for, I don't know, 15 years now, right? And it's taken us a while to really get there, but particularly over the last few years, we've shifted. And that includes Intune management. That includes, actually doing full things that are all cloud-based, which includes Entra joining your devices. It shouldn't hopefully be a surprise to anyone that I'm saying this, right? And we're in a good spot. We've really been saying, internally, the time is now to be talking to customers about this and for customers to really if they haven't begun their journey to, start dipping their toes in the water, because that's where we're at.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's what I say to my customers as well. If you have existing devices, we understand you might want to hybrid join those, but once they go through Autopilot reset, Autopilot for a repurposed device, or a new device going through Autopilot, Entra Join that device. We do have a question that came from Aaron, and we were kind of talking about this earlier. Aaron's question: does Microsoft have any plans to integrate Windows updates, including driver updates, into Autopilot? And I love that, because plans, like, can you define plans? We have plans, but Juanita, how do you, when we do get that request a lot, so how do you typically answer that?
Yeah. So getting updates into Autopilot is something that we would like to do as well. We're excited to do that. We won't be able to roll them all out at once. So when we do finally roll them out, you won't see updates, OS updates, security updates, driver updates, firmware updates. We're kind of going to phase them in iteratively. I don't have a timeline that I can provide, unfortunately, but I will say that I have seen it work. I have seen the mechanics behind it, and it is very cool to see, and I can't wait for us to roll it out. But again, no timeline, but we're hopefully almost there.
Yeah, we have a link, aka.ms Intune feedback, or /Intune feedback. Give us that feedback. We hear it from our customers. Jason and I, we talk to a lot of enterprise customers. We have people on our team that talk to government and education customers, and I know Deepika and Juanita talk to customers as well. But we only hear the feedback from the customers that we talk to. So Intune feedback for those customers that we don't happen to speak to every day. Yeah, Deepika, what's your thoughts? We just had Ignite. Ignite was 2 weeks ago. We talked a lot about AI. We talked a lot within Intune. What are your thoughts coming out of Ignite, and where do you hope to see our customers going coming out of Ignite?
Great question, Joe. Ignite this year was fantastic. For Intune specifically, I would say I was most excited by our security copilot announcements, our data and analytics story, the roadmap and the path that we have for data and AI. We did announce the Intune pivot as part of our Ignite announcements. My team is working on that. I'm super excited to get that functionality in front and in the hands of the customers to try out and help them learn more about their device state and what a single device, what is the state of that, and query against that device. So I'm really excited about what Intune and what management is doing in the space of AI.
Great. I'm excited about that too. We just had, right before this session, some of you may have seen this, we had a session on generative AI with Lavanya and Scott and Ravi in Nandini, and it was a fantastic session. If you haven't seen it yet, aka.ms, TT Intune plus AI, I think is the link. But we'll get that link here as well. We have a question from Anthony. I think I'm going to throw this over to Jason. Is there an architectural recommendation for naming Entra ID groups for Intune or in Intune for Windows? I know it depends on organizational structure, but curious if there's some best practices that we can follow or that you recommend following.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one to answer because every organization is going to be different. It really does depend upon what you have in your organization. I mean, to start off with, having a naming convention clearly for everything in Entra ID is super important, right? We learned this the hard way in on-prem days. So I'm an old timer here as far as, maintaining on-prem infrastructure where everyone just named whatever, right? They had servers named Spider-Man and things like that, right?
Hey, wait a minute. Did you work for my company? We had a server named Spider-Man.
Well, everyone had a web server named Spider-Man, right? I mean, that was kind of the clear one. But that quickly got out of hand, as the organizations grew. And so we started off in Entra, and Entra just exploded, right, for most organizations as well. And so you ended up having the same problem, but it was exponentially more difficult to control or to get your hands around if you didn't start with that good naming convention right off the bat. So same thing here, right? You want to have whatever it is. It doesn't really matter what you choose as long as you choose something that's distinctive. Now, taking it down another notch to being autopilot specific. If you are doing autopilot specific things and you want to segregate those groups to make sure that people aren't accidentally putting something in there, absolutely, right? Put an AP in there. A great thing about Entra ID, I can't say I've looked into it, but I don't think there's like, what we had in traditional AD with the group naming limits and username limits and the things that we had, going way back to NT4 and those things. So you can make it as long as you need to make it. Another reason for these questions often is, hey, I don't want to box myself into an alley, a corner, however you want to characterize it, into something that I can't change later and that's going to mess everything up. It's great motivation for asking these types of questions. In this case, though, right, you can always change group names. The group names, right, there's always an object ID behind the scenes. And in this case, you can always change it later. So you're not going to be boxed in. Just choose something that means something to you, document it, enforce it, and then move on, right? There's bigger and better questions or more important questions and challenges for you to tackle in your environment. Just choose something that seems to make sense.
And I think I have to call my old boss and tell him to rename our web server now. So thank you for bringing that to light. And thanks, Jason. We do have a question from Rob also on shared devices. So I think I'm going to start again with you, Jason. But from Rob, what is your take on cloud managing devices that are in a factory hall used by multiple users that need to monitor certain processes in the factory or need to create a task for a machine quickly? They don't have time to log on or log off to get that task assigned to them, for instance.
Yeah, unique challenge there. It's a little bit like what we typically call the frontline worker challenge, right? Where you have that device that maybe multiple users or maybe no user actually, again, logs into. Someone just walks up to it, does something to it, or it just goes off and does its job. We don't have anything specific for that exact scenario today, right? You're going to have to do some customization. You're going to have to determine what your requirements are and figure out how, the knobs and switches that we put into the product best apply to that exact scenario. Monitoring is not something that Intune generally does. So that's the first off the bat, right? If that's your question, if you're looking to doing real-time monitoring of a system, that's not Intune's intent to begin with. So right tool for the right job. It's always one of the first questions to ask, right? Intune's not meant to solve every single challenge of monitoring workstations. And that's okay, right? We know that. Hopefully you guys know that. And if you don't, now you do, right? Go look for the right tool to get the job done. And yes, that may mean looking outside of Microsoft or using PowerShell, maybe rolling your own, doing what needs to be done to get that job done. Next thing, as far as, other types of, multi-user tasks, there's some decent controls built into Windows. But again, same type of thing. Windows itself is a generic operating system. There are times you're going to have to build or go to a third party to get that last mile. So I can't say I've worked with anyone on the factory. One of the things is unique about factories as well is they often don't let them connect to the internet, right? Those devices, because of the risks that are involved with connecting to the internet. At that point, going back to my opening statement of everything going to the cloud effectively, is clearly not the case, right? And we know that, right? The world isn't ubiquitous. We've embraced lots of heterogeneous things over the past few years, including operating systems. But this is another one of those where we know that people are going to be segregated from the internet. And at that point, you've got to look at your other options. ConfigMgr there. It's still a great option for some of these things. And for those disconnected networks that can't be joined to the internet for whatever reason, or the devices can't connect to the internet for whatever reason, ConfigMgr is still a great option and will continue to be a great option for those types of scenarios.
Thanks. I'm going to expand on something that you had mentioned because it also goes back to something Deepika mentioned. One thing you had just said was Intune's not meant to do real-time administration on a device. But Deepika, you just talked a little bit about Intune Pivot that you're working on and your team's working on. I'd love to expand on that for the people that haven't heard about Intune Pivot. They may be using CM Pivot. So they heard pivot and something clicked in their mind. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Definitely, Joe. And yes, there is corollary to what customers are already using with CM Pivot. They're used to that functionality. What we are working on right now is obviously for all Intune managed devices at a single device level so that you can reach out to a device. The scenario that we are really going after is the troubleshooting scenario. What is happening on my device? what are the kind of settings that are on the device. If we will initially be launching with a set of what we call as entities that are available to query against for that device that you're trying to troubleshoot. And then you're trying to learn about, okay, what is it that is not working out for that device that you want to. And then you can obviously come back to the Intune portal and fix those things or take action on how to move forward with the device that you're trying to troubleshoot. So that's definitely one of the hero scenarios, but I can imagine other scenarios where you want to learn more about the device that you want to reach out to.
Yeah, thanks. And it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to having this. As an old CM guy myself, I'm trying not to say SCCM. As an old CM guy myself, all the way back to SMS 2.0, I was so happy to see CM pivot, and I'm happy to see that evolve into Intune pivot. So I'm looking forward to that. We have a question from Casper on LinkedIn. Oh, before we even talk about Casper's question, some of you may have seen my tweet earlier saying, hey, come on by to say hi. Our friend Rudy Ooms did come by to say hi, so I want to just give a shout out to Rudy. Always a pleasure to see him come up in the comment section in our AMA. So thanks, Rudy, and hello to you. All right, question from Casper on LinkedIn. How long does it take the hybrid join during deployment? I'm guessing this means during an Autopilot deployment. How can I troubleshoot a device in Azure AD or Entra ID staying pending for too long? Juanita, what's your experience with how long that hybrid join should take if I'm doing that through Autopilot?
Yeah, so a hybrid join does take longer. There's probably, I'd say, at least an additional 30-minute time to hybrid join, which is another reason why you say that it's not entirely a great experience for your users. There's not a whole lot of control that we have over that because it is joining to your on-prem domain. But yeah, it does take you probably whatever. It's depending on the amount of apps and stuff you have as well within there, like what else you're doing, what other configurations you have. But if you were doing a pure AD join, you'd probably want to add at least like another 30 minutes or so if you're doing hybrid to it. As I think there was a second part to that question. How can you troubleshoot a device? So if a device is pending for too long, one of the things you probably would want to do is make sure you have your timeouts configured properly so that you can troubleshoot it properly. That's the thing with hybrid is if you, it does take a while for the connection. So I do see a lot of times people will have incorrect timing. So they'll set their Autopilot deployments for like 30 minutes and it takes a lot longer than that to apply everything. So then they get failures or then they get things trying to continue to run. So I check your timing that you have there as well. Also with troubleshooting is the first thing you have to do is pull logs. If it's stuck in pending, I don't think it will trigger an auto log collection. But if it fails, we do have this functionality in Intune where we will automatically upload the logs to Intune so that you don't have to manually collect it from the device. So as far as troubleshooting goes, like getting the logs is kind of the first thing for us to see, okay, what happened and where. I know it's not ideal. We are working on our reporting. I promise it'll get better. Can't promise when, but we are working on it to make it more visible on what's happening on the device without you needing to collect those logs.
Yeah, and as we talked about earlier, we do recommend through Autopilot to do the pure native join to join. But really, that's one of the reasons. It's just a much better admin experience. It's a better user experience. And you can get more information on that, aka.ms/cloud native endpoints, where we kind of really spell out why that's one of our suggestions, one of our recommendations. We have a question from Charlie on how can I test this stuff out? He wants to know, is there a way to set up a free or inexpensive Intune cloud lab for learning how to implement features like Autopilot without disrupting our production use? I think I'm going to start with Deepika because I see you nodding your head. Is there, what are we telling our customers? How can they sign up for a free lab or a free tenant?
Free lab, free tenant. Good question, Joe. I will also lean on Jason and Juanita to chime in and correct me if they hear something wrong. But one of the things that I really like about is that you can always create a group of devices that you can play around with, and you can target your policies to a set of devices that are not in production use. So even within your production tenant, you can create a group of devices and you can target your Autopilot profile only for those test devices that you really want to try testing the Autopilot configuration on, right? Like, so that's one thing that I think customers can do irrespective of whether, if they are already using Intune and they want to try something new, they should be able to do that in a very simple manner without disrupting any of their existing configurations.
And I know someone asked this yesterday. We've had, I don't know, 15 or 18 sessions already. And somebody did ask this, and it might be the same question. And I know that in there, we also talked about how you can use the deployment lab kit, which is aka.ms/deployment lab kit. This gives you eval software, Windows, Office, virtual machines, everything you need to start testing it out. You still do need to have that free or eval Azure tenant. And Jason, can you talk about that? How do we get that free or, again, an eval Azure tenant? Well, we can start using the things like this deployment kit to start testing things out without disrupting our prod environment.
Yeah, it's basically a matter of just going and setting it up. I think it's a 90-day trial to begin with, and those trials generally can be extended because 90 days doesn't always sound like the longest time, but to my knowledge, they can be extended. You can talk to your account team if you happen to have an account team. If you're just an individual, I think there's still a process. I think in Intune itself, there's actually a button that says extend trial. Can't say I've done it in a while, so I don't remember exactly where it is, but I'm pretty sure if you go in there, you can do that. And you can get up to like 270 days total, I think, something along those lines. So one of the cool parts, though, about both Intune as well as Entra and Entra ID is that you're not really setting up any infrastructure here, right? This isn't the old days where you're setting up your domain controller and then you're having to, image your servers and deploy new servers and all those kinds of things. It's literally just a handful of clicks, right? A handful of information, and it's there, right? That's the beauty of the cloud, both for production use, because you as an organization don't have to do all those things, but even in lab use, you don't have to get all these things set up. It's just there, and you can start using it pretty much right out of the box. And so even if you do have to go and set up a new 90-day trial, right, you get a new email address to be able to go do that, or however that works, because I can't say I've explicitly done that one either. But, it shouldn't be too big of a deal to go get another live address or a Google address or whatever address you want to get a new account, set up a new lab. It doesn't take that long, and it's a good learning curve as well, right? And it doesn't take that long at all to do.
Yeah, thanks. And I do love that we have those trials that we offer. And I love the Office and Windows Lab Kit, the deployment lab kit that we just had the link up a second ago, because it does give you all the software you need. You don't have to go to our eval center, start downloading one at a time. Well, let me download Office. Let me download a couple of ISOs of Windows 11. We give it all to you, right? You just download it once and guides and everything to help you set it up. I also want to shout out to a couple of people I see commenting here. Rob DeRoos, I've seen you on a lot of these sessions, so thanks for sticking with us all week. Also, Nathan, I see you on several sessions, so thank you for sticking with us all week as well. And, we're not even halfway done with day 3, so I hope to see you all even going forward. So we have a question from Nathan, which is what made me think about that. When you create an Intune config profile using the settings catalog and configure user settings, what's the difference if you assign them to the device versus assigning it to a user? If you assign them to the device, does that mean any user who signs into the Windows device gets those settings? And if you assign the same settings to users, does it only apply for the user currently signed in? And so I want to think about not the way group policy did it, but the way CSPs and Intune does it. Jason, can you answer that for Nathan?
Yeah, so the answer he gave was basically correct, right?
Yeah.
If you assign it to the user, then it's going to go to that user on every device that user logs into, right? So if that user only logs into one device, it's kind of no big deal to actually expand on that. But if you have multi-user devices or you have users that float between devices, really, then it's going to apply to them on every single device that they actually log onto, and kind of flip-flop that for the devices, right? So if you apply it to a device, it's going to apply to every user on that device. It is a paradigm shift, kind of like you were alluding to, Joe, from group policies. You have to wrap your head around that a little bit. It's not overly difficult, but It's one of those things, and I think Juanita alluded to this as well, right? When you go from config manager to Intune, it's different, right? It's not bad, it's not good, it's just different. And sometimes you need to forget about the way you used to do it to be able to do it the new way, or the updated / different way. And that's what it is. So there is actually a document section on this. So you can, that goes into a few of the details here. There's a couple of things that people would potentially miss from group policy, like loopback. I was going to say short circuiting, but it's actually loopback. There's no explicit way to do loopback, but you, depending upon your exact requirements, using user targeting and user settings, you can still kind of get there on your devices. Like I said, the doc section is pretty good. There are a couple of social media blog posts out there as well. The one that I always look for, because I have trouble finding this in the docs for whatever reason, is Kenneth Van Serksum. Actually has a blog post, and he has links to the official docs in there as well. So, I always remember how to find things and not what those things specifically are. So I go search for Kenneth's post, and then within there, he's got the actual links in there.
I don't suppose you know how to spell Kenneth's last name there.
Van Serksum? No, I have no clue. Vansurken would be my guess, but.
All right, thanks, Jason. We have a question about conflict validation, and I like this question because we had one of the sessions yesterday ended a little bit early, so Ravi had a demo that he had on there where you can basically say, hey, Copilot, is this setting going to conflict with any other settings? Deepak, I'm going to let you comment on this. The question from Jacob is, will we ever get a conflict insight pane that allows us to see conflicts before they happen through validation? If we create a policy, it will check to see if there's a setting that's configured in another policy. Policy conflict resolution would be a better pane, winky smiley point. So it came up as winky smile in the tech community. So can you comment on that and maybe talk about what Ravi was showing yesterday?
First of all, Jacob, thank you for that question. I definitely see that as a very, very interesting needed thing where the IT administrators, the users, they would want to know what is happening and what is getting deployed to the device. So definitely, I totally see the value in what you're asking for. I have not seen the demo from Ravi yesterday, but I would say that like building a skill like that and getting that information in the hands of the admins, super valuable, so that you can troubleshoot even before actual issues happen in your environment. So I totally see the value in that. But unfortunately, I did not see the demo.
I'm going to turn away for a second to see. We had an advanced analytics session yesterday, and I'm sure we have this session, the link here. Yep. aka.ms TT Advanced Analytics. At the end of the second, there was a double session. At the end of the second one, we went through a number of demos, and that was one of them where you can say, is this policy configured anywhere else? Which is really nice. It's a really nice skill that we've had, I don't say we have added, we are adding, and Ravi showed how that works in one of the demos. So, all right, we have a couple more questions that came in, and one of them that I see that just came in, I see a lot, and I actually see it a couple times here. And Jason, I'm going to come to you. I'm going to talk about server management in Intune, because I just saw the question pop up a second time, and I saw it earlier today as well in my tech community feed. So where are we going with server management in Intune?
Yeah, anytime we talk about the shift from Config Manager, because Config Manager basically did it all for Windows, then this is one of those questions that comes up, along with the one I mentioned previously, which is the disconnected networks, right? There are things that we know Intune does well and was designed to do, and that's really the bottom line here. Is we set out on a mission to do things with Intune, and we had a scope of things, right? And outside that scope of things is things like disconnected networks, is still server, right, OS. That's a strategic decision from the top. We fully understand that there is concern or a potential gap there. For today, Config Manager is 100% still there. Again, and I said that before, Config Manager will be there as long as folks need it for these other scenarios, right? We don't want people to stay on Config Manager for our main scenarios, but it is there if it fits your requirements, and those scenarios are part of those requirements. As far as what the future holds, I've said this one a few times, is every now and then we will say never, right? And then we think about it ourselves and we are like, yeah, we've said never a few times, and things change. So highly unlikely that things will change. We don't see a reason that that will change from our strategic perspective. There are cloud management tools. Azure Arc is a broad umbrella of tools for different management and monitoring of different components within Azure IaaS and on-prem as well. That's generally where all of our server management, energy, commitments, et cetera, are going today. So if you're looking for a cloud management solution for your server OSs, your Windows server OSs, as well as your Linux server OSs, then the technologies within Azure Arc, there's a bunch of different things like Azure Update Management, and there's a handful of other different pieces that are actually part of Azure Arc. That's where we would point you to. Compare there, figure out what your requirements are, and see if that matches up. At this time, it's not going to be Intune, and that's the best that this group in general can say, is that Intune at this point has no plans of moving into the server OS management space.
Yeah, and the way Andrew worded it in his question, the second one that I saw come up, it's a pipe dream to hope for server management and Intune. And as it's Jason saying right now, we don't have any plans to add that, but we try to never say never. We've said never in the past, and it's come back to bite us, and so we try to never say never. We have a question here from Joseph. Joseph's asking, I'm rather interested in whether Copilot will allow us to manage Microsoft security baselines more effectively in Intune. Along with that, are there any plans to rework the baseline feature? It makes for a rather confusing experience to work on getting security policies in place with so many areas to navigate to. There are major features missing that make it hard to review new baselines, such as being able to export baselines to JSON. So before we talk about the baseline specifically, let's talk about, I kind of want to expand on this a little bit. I'm rather interested in whether Copilot will allow us to manage security baselines. Let's talk about some of the things Copilot will allow us to manage. So Deepika, what can we do with Copilot? Are you able to talk about some of the things we can do? I don't think we can specifically manage baselines, but what are some things we can do with Copilot?
That's a great question, Joe. What I do know is we are building the skills, and we are in the process of adding new skills. We are trying out, testing out skills with the customers, some customers as well. In fact, one skill would be, and I'm kind of alluding a little bit to what's coming in the future, but I can imagine skills being built on top of Intune Pivot, for example. Give me a device that has this setting or has this value for a CSP, things like that. So definitely the skill development will continue to add in our, I would say, a catalog, right? Like we will continue to add more and more skills, and policies would be definitely one I can imagine saying, can you read what the policy is, and can you set what the policy is for a certain device as well? So those are things that I think we will continue to see getting added.
And thank you. I was just going to say, you can see more of what we are doing at aka.ms Intune Security Copilot. And Joseph, if you have specific skills you'd love to see, just give us that feedback, aka.ms Intune feedback as well. Jason, I'm going to come to you to talk a little bit more about the other part of his question. Is there are so many places to set these policies. Something like BitLocker, for example, I can set that in settings catalog. I can set that through security. I can set that through a security baseline. Like there's so many places. How do we recommend to our customers to do those types of policies where you can set them in multiple places?
Yeah, it's another common question. It's another good question to answer and to ask. It's one that's come up. Honestly, it's one that I've asked before. So prior to my time being an FTE at Microsoft, it's one that I posed to the product group as well. So it's not new. It's not going to explicitly go away in the near future for a lot of reasons, right? We'd be cutting people off is effectively what it is. So we want to be able to gracefully transfer people over. And we've started doing that with some of the newer policies behind the scenes. But clearly that's a long and in-depth process. So going back to the core question, though, what do we recommend for customers to do? We want them to start with baselines. Baselines are the place to start. Those are our core recommendations to meet, in particular, security, right? That's generally where all folks should start if they're coming up with new, if they're transitioning from old, right? Juanita alluded to a lot of this before, right? Is you've got a lot of this old stuff that who knows what it's there for. Why do we even need to have this anymore? And most of the time you don't even know the answer, right? So start with baselines, because those are the ones you need, regardless if you had them before or not. You need security. And so the security baselines are the ones to start with. And then from there, right, it's whatever meets your needs best. Settings catalog is generally where we want folks to go, but settings catalog, there's some things that are outside of settings catalog, like endpoint protection, right? There's a handful of other security ones, but there's baselines for those as well. So generally start with baselines, move to settings catalog for anything that's not in a baseline, and then layer from there. And then at some point, Copilot reporting, something along those lines is going to help fill in those gaps as well. That as far as giving you the information you need to know around what isn't configured.
Yeah, I love that. We start thinking about the last part of his question also is it's hard. Major features missing make it hard to review new security baselines, being able to export those to a JSON file. And it's good feedback. Again, we still have the feedback link up there, being able to export security baselines so I can compare them as we do make changes periodically to the baselines. There are some settings catalog policies that you can actually export. So export from my dev tenant and import it into my prod tenant. We do have that, but that's really the settings catalog. So it's great feedback, and please add that feedback if you want to see security baselines be exportable as well. We have a question that came from, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but Nangana on LinkedIn. When a device appears in devices in Entra, but not onboarding into Intune, is there a way to manually onboard such devices? We're not talking about Autopilot. Please no Autopilot. So we see the device in Entra, but it didn't automatically onboard into Intune. Is there a way to manually onboard this device, maybe from Intune or from the Entra portal, not from the device itself? Jason, since you're
I'll take this one again. This is another one of those, a common question. We do have a handful of customers that have done Entra Join or previously the AADJ, and they didn't have a management solution in place, or they were using potentially a competitive management solution, or there's probably a couple of other reasons how they got into this scenario where they did that Entra Join first. So now how do you bring them on into Intune? There's a handful of challenges with that. Who's an administrator on that box, right? We can't just reach out to a box that we're not an administrator on, or we don't have administrative privileges on, and make them Intune managed, right? That would effectively mean a hacker, bad guy, however you want to characterize them, could go and do that to any system on the internet if you don't have admin privileges, right? It's a core key piece of all of this. And that's number one thing. Number two thing is, well, does the user even have privileges on that box, local admin privileges? In most cases, yes. And in that case, it needs to be a user-centric activity because, again, they're the administrator, right? There's no other administrative control over that. Being joined to Entra doesn't give you explicit administrator control. There's a couple of ways to get that done, but now you've got to be able to remotely get to that box to enable that. Entra is not a management tool, right? And Entra ID is not a management tool. So it has to be something user-centric at that point in time. It is something we've discussed a lot internally, and we've tried to figure out ways and what we could or should do. I mean, should is a big piece in here. At this point, we don't have a great answer for that one. Today, technically, the best and really only thing you can do is if the user's a local admin is get them to actually do that. If they're not a local admin, then you really should consider reprovisioning that box anyway, because who knows what state that's in. I mean, that's the beauty kind of Autopilot is it's literally just a reset. You can leave most things in place and you can now get that box going again and reprovisioned. A little more complicated than that, right? There's a little bit more involved in that, but that is ultimately the pie in the sky here, right? Is that's what you want to be able to do. And if you have things set up well, you could do that. Yeah, generally speaking, as long as you have Intune set up as that MDM authority in Entra, and you have the appropriate licenses for that auto enrollment. Once the device is Entra joined, it should auto enroll into. Correct. That's assuming everything's in place at the time of the device being enrolled. And as you said, for the user to do that, and for those of you that don't know how that would happen, they can do that from the Windows 11 settings app, settings, users, access worker, school, and then connect. That way is how they would do that manually, or provisioning package would also work as well. So thank you for that. We have a question from Dylan. I'm going to come up to Juanita for this question.
because I actually hear this question a lot as well. When testing using Autopilot for hybrid devices, I'm seeing 2 device entries get created in Entra for the one device. How do we properly maintain those? Only one of them is managed by Intune and the other one is not, but the entries are linked together in some backend sort of way. So if you have any device-based groups, it's hard to know which entry got added to the group since you can't see which one is managed in Intune. How do we manage that? We get two objects in Entra for that hybrid join device. How do we manage that?
Yeah, that's a good question, and one that we get quite a bit. And this kind of goes back to, again, the design of Autopilot, right? It was originally designed for cloud-based, 100% cloud-based deployments, and then we kind of tried to refactor it to make it work for hybrid. And so you do have some bumps and hiccups that we have with hybrid. So the reason why you see 2 devices is, again, that's by design, because if you're doing hybrid, how we need to be aware that this device exists, right? It's a cloud-based deployment, and we don't have that level of Autopilot, doesn't have that level of access to your on-prem domain without knowing that there's a cloud object available for us to latch onto. And then once you go through the deployment, now you want to do hybrid, so we have to connect the 2. So there's always 2. So if you delete the Autopilot option, the Autopilot device, the Azure AD object, then if you reset that device, it won't go through Autopilot anymore, because we won't have that connection to your on-prem environment to know that, hey, this is a cloud-based device that you want to receive this Autopilot profile. So we are trying to see what we can do about it. But again, it's kind of just the way that it is designed in order to make the hybrid solution fit into the modern cloud story.
Square peg, round hole, kind of, sort of, right, Juanita?
Yeah.
Thinking the same thing. And we do have a good link here, some good documentation that kind of explains some of that, and our recommendations, ak.ms/remote+hybrid. We have that right up on the screen, so take a look at that as well. I saw another question come up. I think Nathan asked this question, and the question is something that we've all heard this many, many, many times. And 180, you alluded to, like, people that are leaving Configuration Manager, they want to bring their Configuration Manager processes into the cloud. The question is really from Nathan: any plans on involving Autopilot ESP or anything within Intune, really, to add things like application ordering or sequencing? Running scripts, allowing for user input, for example, asking users to set a BitLocker pin. Anything we plan on doing with ESP to allow for any of this?
We do. We have a lot of changes coming up with ESP and how we're handling it. Again, all these changes are not going to come all at once. They're going to be iterative. We're going to build on it. And again, to what I said earlier, right? Autopilot isn't quite SCCM, but I do get the love of task sequencing. It's kind of like a fail safe for a lot of things, and it's like I think if Autopilot provided more details, more context, more reporting on what's going on, I think people might feel more comfortable not having that like granular control, and it's also something that we're working on. And while task sequencing is a CM construct, we don't currently have plans to add the whole task sequence ability to Autopilot. We do have plans for app sequencing. That is on our roadmap. That is something that we would like to get to, but not in the same way that you're used to seeing task sequencing in CM.
So yeah, it's very common that we get that. I want to install these 80 applications in this order because I did that in my task sequence. And my answer is always, why does the user need to see all 80 of those when they first get their device? Give them the 5 or 6 that they absolutely need when they first get their device, and let Intune just deploy the apps after that. And there are some use cases that do need all 80 installed before the first person logs in, but for the most part, it's just a change of thinking. And I'm looking forward to seeing how we evolve that. And by the way, ESP's enrollment status page. Basically, it's the we're setting things up for you page that you see during Autopilot. For those of you that may not know what that is. So thank you for that. We have a question here from Justin, which could really go to all of us. Are there any recommendations on how to do a bare metal OS deployment when you're on Intune using Autopilot? We know that Autopilot needs to have something on the device before it can actually go through Autopilot. So are there any recommendations on how we should be doing a bare metal OS deployment? Going through the OEM is not always possible, and MDT, we know, is not famously, it's not supported with Windows 11. Running Configuration Manager just for that doesn't really make a lot of sense either. So what's our plans or recommendations on when we have to swap out an SSD or something? We have a bare metal deployment.
Yeah, I guess I'll go ahead and I'll start that one. I think there's some other things in motion here, but today we don't have an explicit recommendation, kind of whatever works for you. I think the easiest and best thing for most orgs would be to start with the OEM media, because that's what the devices came with originally, right? That's not always possible, or for lots of different reasons, that's not always the best option. But the OEMs themselves have a bare metal restore capability, or some of them do. Sometimes there's some fees. I don't know all the fees and fee schedules that are potentially involved there, but a lot of them do. I know Surface does, right? That's the one I do know well. Surface has a bare metal recovery from the cloud, right? So you can actually get the latest image down from the cloud and restore from there. So you'll have to check with your OEMs on that one. MDT, and I know that was called out as don't do MDT because or you can't do MDT because it's not Windows 11 compatible. We know that. It is still possible if you're still on Windows 10 for now. We know you shouldn't be for very long, but people will be for a little while, or some people will be for a little while as well. You can use just standard Windows media as well, right? There's nothing preventing you from downloading. There's a OS image creator tool. I think it's what it's called. You can download that and it'll get the latest image, right? And you can start from that. Really anything that'll get you a clean image. There are a couple of community solutions out there as well. I won't call one out by name, but there is one that's pretty popular by a dude out of Houston. And his is really popular. And we've had some really large organizations actually use it. Having said that, we don't have an explicit requirement. That kind of also means that, yeah, we know that this is a gap and there are investigations on us filling this gap today. I don't think anything's been announced recently, so there's really nothing to announce, but it is an ongoing investigation.
Deepika, I see you nodding your head. Pretty.
Yeah, we've definitely heard the feedback, Joe. And like Jason said, this is something that the team has been investigating. And once we have something to share, we would absolutely want to share on how we can make this easier for our customers.
I would call out a couple of links here. One is our Intune in development page. Even though it may not be listed here, aka.ms, Intune in dev. Keep up to date with stuff that we are working on. Some of it might be in preview already. Some of it's not yet in preview, but Intune in dev. And the other one, of course, is aka.ms, Intune new. For anything newly released in Intune, we keep you informed of that as well here. And this is a very long page. Like we don't delete the stuff off the bottom of it. So this goes several months and years back as well. So Intune in dev, Intune new. So keep your eyes open for that. As Jason said, there's been no announcements, but we do know that this has been heavily requested because people want to use Autopilot. Like they want to use Autopilot, and they do see that as the gap, is that bare metal deployment. We have a question here from Ron. Ron's asking about, and Jason, you and I talk about this, and we get this all the time. Ron wants to know, will Microsoft provide steps to migrate hybrid AD joined user profiles into Azure AD profiles with minimal use impact and without the need to wipe their profile? In other words, I want to go from my hybrid joined device to my cloud native device, but my user profile is going to be all messed up when I do that. What are we doing about that?
Yeah, I'll prefix this one real quick by saying, when we say that, yeah, we've talked about this one internally a lot. In a way, that's us saying we're talking about the right things, or you're validating that we're talking about the right things. Because if we're not talking about this internally already, then we've probably got some other issues. So that's a good thing from my perspective. Hopefully it is from everyone else's perspective as well. On this one specifically, this is a long running conversation. We fully understand what customers see the value of having a tool or process like this is. The problem comes in is it's not just user profiles. Right. We fully understand that you want to preserve the user profiles, the applications, the user data, the user config, those kinds of things, and thus have a minimal impact on the end user. The problem is it's not just about those things when the device's identity and state transitions from a hybrid join, which is really an on-prem join, to an Entra Join device. There are lots of other things like group policies. What do we do with group policies at that point, right? There could be all kinds of interesting things tattooed in there that will have long-term ramifications that we really don't know and are really difficult to test. There are a handful of other things that change because of that state change as well that are really difficult to sort out. And at the end of the day, the best way to handle them is to just wipe them and start clean. And if that's the answer for all of these different constructs, these internal constructs in Windows, then isn't the best answer at the end of the day just to wipe and clean that entire device itself, or reset that device, get it back to that clean state? And so that's the conclusion every time we go down these investigations on is yes, the amount of effort it would take us to not only test and design how to transition all of these different constructs from one state to the other is years, right? We've estimated some of this out. It's years. By the time we get down that road, it's not necessarily going to be valuable to anyone anyway. We also throw in, user data preservation. That's kind of a core construct of moving to the cloud anyway. Things like OneDrive, right, can already address that challenge for you. Restoring applications. I think there is a public preview coming. There is investigations around restoring applications in Intune. I don't remember exactly when that got released or when it's going to get released, but we have something on the way of restoring applications, right? So you've got user data, you've got applications restored. In an ideal environment, you're already having to deal, well, not an ideal, in every environment, you're already having to deal with users transitioning between hardware, right? You've had to do that with Windows 11 because of the Windows 11 floor. You've got lost devices, stolen devices, etc. You're already having to deal with it. So the best thing is to make sure that you can deal with that in all these generic use cases anyway, so that when you have to come to this challenge, right, you've already got processes in place to address this challenge. We've all done this before. Every organization's had to do this. We're just asking you to do it, make it a little more formal, because it's not the last time that users are ever going to get new hardware, right? Once again, Windows 11 is going to force a lot of users and has forced a lot of users to get new hardware. So that's an ideal time to do this when you're doing that Windows 11 transition, because you've already got a reason that they're getting new hardware. There are potentially a few little gaps in here that we struggle with internally in trying to figure out, well, how do we best address this? But it is about a commitment to having that clean system, starting clean slate. We know that there are some people who have attempted this as well, and their experience in the long run is pretty poor. And so, again, the engineering investment time that we feel would be required to do this and do this right and actually support everything, which is another key piece in here, making sure that we can guarantee that this is going to work in the long run. That's really costly and it's really complex. And so it doesn't make sense as an engineering org for us to even go down this path when we know we have a better path. And yes, we understand that shifts a little bit of a burden to the organizations. But if you've already embraced cloud and the constructs of cloud, which preserving user state, user data, user applications, then this isn't that big of a challenge. And getting to cloud, once again, you have to do some of these things. So that's our stance. At the end of the day, no, we have no intent on building a tool like this.
And people have asked us, why do you recommend Autopilot cloud and then existing devices hybrid? This is why. You're just passing along technical debt later. If you get new devices, make them hybrid. Later, you have to wipe them to bring them back to the cloud. Or up to the cloud. So this is why. I want to thank you all. This is great conversations. We're going to continue in the comments. We'll continue reviewing the comments and adding, answering the comments over the next several days. So final thoughts. The way I see you all on the screen, I see Juanita, Deepika, Jason. Any final thoughts for our viewing audience? Juanita first.
Oh, okay. Final thoughts, again, as Joe said, thank you everyone for joining this call. We really do appreciate your questions. Please make sure that you fill out that aka.ms/Intune feedback link. We'd love to hear your feedback. Like we said earlier, we like to make sure that we're working on the right things, we're having the right discussions, and that we're working on what you care about. So thank you.
Thanks. Deepika?
Well said, Juanita. Echo everything that she said. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It was great to talk to you.
And Jason?
Yeah, big plus ones there, right? Feedback super important. I know a lot of people think that sometimes it kind of bounces off, or we're not really hearing. We really do. We have a lot of priorities though, and we have a lot of feedback that we have to prioritize, right? We can't do everything. We really want to. We do. We get into these conversations, but we have to start cutting somewhere. So that feedback helps us figure out what's most important to work on. So please make sure that you're always telling us in whatever medium channel that you have the ability to do. We really want to hear it. And then again, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank everyone for the last couple days, for the next couple days, for watching us on LinkedIn, on X, on Tech Community. Thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you all. I hope to see the same people I've been seeing session after session, asking just great insightful questions and giving us that feedback. Keep it going over the next several hours today and into tomorrow. I want to say thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the time.